Musashi had always been seen as a nobody in his village. He lost his parents during a deadly epidemic that swept through the region, but instead of receiving sympathy, people acted as if it was punishment he deserved. The villagers didn't bury his parents. They burned their house to erase their name. His parents had always gone against the beliefs of the community, and that alone was enough for the adults to call upon the so-called Soni, believing it would restore order. When Musashi became an orphan, the law said his relatives had to take him in, but his uncle refused. Musashi, refusing to give up, stayed kneeling in front of his uncle's door for days until finally they convinced the man to let him stay. From that day on, Musashi tried his best to earn his place. He promised to help with house chores, stay quiet, and never cause trouble. But in return, he was given strict rules. He had to remain unseen and never associate with anyone who had once been close to his parents. When he asked why, he was met with only cold silence. One day, thinking he was doing the right thing, he took his uncle's forgotten lunch to him at work. But instead of gratitude, it only became another reason for punishment. From then on, Musashi learned to live in silence, like he didn't exist, his only wish being that someone, anyone, might see him for who he really was. He never knew that one day he'd have to kill the only person who ever saw him. That moment came when he saw a boy practicing sword techniques in secret. His name was Kojiro, and he hid his training because his family was also shunned. Instead of rejecting him, Musashi felt admiration and wanted to learn too. That's how their friendship began, one that would change both of their lives. They became inseparable, training together, sharing dreams, and for the first time, Musashi wasn't alone, and Kojiro had a true friend. As years passed, Musashi entered school and began learning the history of their world, Yomoto, a land that was once free and peaceful until the appearance of a mighty demon lord whose arrival ended human rule. The generals of that era tried to resist, fighting demons known as Oni, but one by one they fell. Still, descendants of those warriors continued fighting in the shadows. However, most of society no longer saw the Oni as enemies. They were now worshipped as gods, and serving them was seen as a blessing. Many young people dreamed of working in the mines, extracting a special ore offered to the Oni, but Musashi never shared that dream. In class, teachers taught that the old warrior clans called bushi were a danger to society and had brought nothing but suffering. Musashi couldn't believe it. He remembered how Kojiro's father used to tell them stories about those same bushi, heroes who fought to free Hinomoto from the control of the Oni. During those talks, Kojiro once asked if it was possible to defeat an Oni, and Musashi confidently said yes, if they fought together like the bushi. That day, they made a promise. One day they would leave the village, form their own clan, and continue that fight. That memory hit Musashi again when their teacher interrupted class to announce the initiation ceremony. The next day, all students would begin working in the mines. Many were thrilled, dreaming of the glory of serving the Oni, but Musashi already had something different in mind. After class, Musashi went looking for Kojiro. He found him, but Kojiro no longer seemed to share the same fire as before. He told Musashi to prepare for the ceremony like everyone else, but Musashi refused to give up so easily. He appeared holding a pickaxe, not as a tool for work, but as a weapon. It was his way of resisting, his way of fighting. He didn't want to be part of the system, didn't want to live a life serving demons. He begged Kojiro to remember their promise, to escape the village and form their own band of bushi. But Kojiro disagreed. To him, a simple pickaxe could never be a sword. Yet Musashi insisted that it could. He had trained with it for years, mastering it as his own weapon. Suddenly, Kojiro's expression changed. Rage filled his face as he accused Musashi of lying all this time. He felt betrayed, fooled into believing his father's stories, that the bushi were heroes and the Oni were monsters, while the world said otherwise. Musashi tried to convince him not to abandon their dream, not to let despair win, but Kojiro only laughed bitterly, saying not even Musashi truly believed anymore. He shouted that Musashi was just like everyone else, pretending he wanted to be a bushi while acting like a miner who longed to serve the Oni. Musashi couldn't respond, not with words. All he could do was walk away, silently vowing to prove that he still believed, that he had never stopped believing. What Musashi didn't know was that Kojiro was also fighting inside, not out of hate, but because he wanted to protect Musashi from a cruel fate. That night, while gathering trash around town and enduring the villagers' ridicule, Kojiro remembered his father's words, that carrying a sword wasn't only about fighting, it was about remembering who you were. Even though teachers and classmates treated him like an outcast, he never stopped holding onto his sword, the symbol of his lineage and everything he had endured. The next day, the initiation ceremony arrived. The students, filled with mixed emotions, gathered before a massive gate. Some were excited to meet the Oni, imagining a life of comfort and honor in serving them. But Musashi had only one goal: to face them. Once inside, the guards began collecting all belongings, including their pickaxes. The students, full of hope, crossed the gates and found something completely different from what they had been told. The being they thought divine appeared instead as a monstrous creature that suddenly began devouring people. The dream of paradise vanished in seconds. Without fear, Mousashi charged forward, determined to fight, but when he realized he no longer had his weapon, he was left vulnerable. The creature reacted with fury to his defiance, taking on an even more terrifying form. Mousashi tried to fight using a pickaxe he found nearby, but he was easily thrown to the ground and wounded. Even through the pain, he stood up again. His classmates begged him to surrender, to accept his place like everyone else, but he refused. Mousashi remembered that the bushi never kneel, that their duty is to fight even when they stand alone. Then one of his classmates mocked him, reminding him of what he had said before, that he wanted to be a mine worker. At that moment, everything changed. Musashi hesitated. He realized he had lied, that he had betrayed his own dream just to fit in. That brief hesitation was enough for the Oni to strike him again, but even then, he didn't give up. He finally understood that he had been hiding behind lies to avoid rejection, pretending to be someone he wasn't, but not anymore. As the Oni grabbed him, an officer declared that Musashi was finally fulfilling his wish to become a worker. But with the last of his strength, Musashi shouted his true dream, to become a bushi. Enraged by his defiance, the authorities ordered his execution. Just as all hope seemed lost, a powerful motorcycle known as the Kitetsu mount burst into the hall. It was Kojiro. He rammed into the Oni, saving Musashi in front of everyone's astonished eyes and handed him his pickaxe. He also brought a note proving that Musashi had trained with that same tool every day, perfecting his technique. The furious officer screamed that using such a mount was a capital offense and demanded their deaths. Meanwhile, the monstrous creature, though wounded, began to rise again. At that moment, Kojiro finally accepted what his father had always said, that the world was full of monsters, but facing the truth was the first step toward changing it. Musashi, fearless, prepared for battle. He planted his axe into the ground, using it as an improvised sheath, a move Kojiro recognized instantly. From that stance, Musashi launched himself into the air, unsheathed his weapon, and with one decisive strike, split the demon in two. Everyone stood frozen in disbelief, but the fight wasn't over. A red light began descending from the sky, and the officers knelt with devotion. It was another entity, something far greater. Musashi and Kojiro, now united again, jumped onto the motorcycle and charged straight toward the light. Along the way, they cut down every threat that stood in their path. As they rescued trapped workers, Musashi felt exhilarated for the first time. He felt alive, as though he was finally living the dream they once shared, forming their own bushi band. Yet Kojiro didn't share his same excitement. As they approached the mysterious structure known as the Kishin, they were confronted by the shape of a gigantic red bird. What at first seemed majestic quickly transformed into a colossal crimson monster. Both of them froze at its sheer size as the creature tried to crush them, forcing them to flee at full speed on their motorcycle. But they didn't get far. The monster shattered the ground beneath them, sending them plummeting down. What came next was even more horrifying. The Kishin mutated, revealing a new form with 6 arms, and for the first time in 5 years, it showed its true nature. Kojiro, injured but still standing, shouted at Musashi to escape, but Musashi didn't respond. He was unconscious. Kojiro faced the monster alone, fighting desperately, but the creature snatched his sword and tried to devour it. In that instant, Musashi opened his eyes, witnessing the Kishin gripping Kojiro like a mere toy. Kojiro, clutching his sword with all his strength, was dragged across the ground. He remembered how he used to scorn that blade, but now he couldn't let it go. Though he managed to reclaim it for a moment, the monster finally swallowed it whole. In frustration, Kojiro remembered his father's words about what a sword truly meant to a bushi. He felt he had failed for not being able to protect it. But then something unexpected happened. Musashi sprang into action, climbing up the creature's massive body, and with his pickaxe in hand, he began to strike again and again, refusing to stop even as blood and darkness surrounded him. Musashi refused to rest. His goal was to recover the sword. The Kishin tried to crush him, but in doing so, accidentally gave him an opening. Musashi dodged each attack, striking the beast again and again until, with one final effort, he managed to tear open its stomach. The monster collapsed with a thunderous roar, and Musashi was swallowed by the internal fluids. Kojiro ran forward, horrified, thinking his friend was gone for good. But then, to his shock, Musashi rose from within the creature completely unharmed. Holding the sword in his hand, he handed it to Kojiro, who could barely hold back his tears. At that moment, the officials announced the arrival of a massive fortress. Musashi and Kojiro climbed a tower to get a better view and stood speechless. A gigantic moving fortress was heading toward the quarry. A barrier tried to stop it, but it wasn't enough. Dozens of bushi motorcycles broke through the defense, riding straight toward the creature. It was the Take clan, one of the most powerful bushi bands in all of Hinomoto. From the air, warriors descended one by one, their swords gleaming like wings. Leading them was Captain Naotora, who, upon seeing the two young men, ordered them to clear the area. But Mousashi stood firm, declaring that they weren't ordinary kids, that they were bushi too, and proudly claimed to be the one who had opened the monster's stomach. Naotora simply smiled, saying that cutting open a stomach didn't mean defeating the enemy. He pointed to the creature, which was already beginning to regenerate. Musashi was left speechless. Naotora assured him that her team would handle the rest and ordered the evacuation of the remaining workers. As the bushi organized, the creature roared and unleashed a blast of fire. Kojiro urged Musashi to fall back like they were told, but Musashi refused. He felt this was his first real victory and couldn't let it slip away. Kojiro tried to stop him, worried for his safety, but Musashi was determined. This was the dream of his childhood, and he was ready to risk everything for it. Without hesitation, he leaped toward the beast, aiming again for its stomach, but the creature instantly regenerated. Before he could strike again, a glowing rope coiled around him, dragging him back toward the Take clan's camp. As he struggled, begging to keep fighting, Naotora asked why he was so desperate to face such danger. Musashi answered that it was his dream, and he'd rather die trying than live in regret for never doing it. With a mix of admiration and concern, Naotora showed him how even her entire band was struggling to contain just one of the monster's legs, but Musashi didn't stop. Breaking free from the rope, he charged once more. This time, Naotora didn't hold him back. Watching him run, she murmured that he truly was a bushi. Musashi raised his pickaxe high and smashed the ground, searching for a weak point, a chance, anything. Then he jumped toward the monster, remembering Naotora's warning that he couldn't do it alone, but he wanted to try. From a distance, Kojiro shouted that the weak spot was on the horn, right beneath the navel. Musashi aimed and struck, but his pickaxe broke in two. Just as the creature prepared to strike back, Naotora appeared, recognizing Musashi's courage. With a single powerful slash, she severed the horn, and the monster exploded into pieces. Musashi lowered his head, frustrated that he hadn't defeated it himself, but Naotora comforted him, saying that what mattered wasn't who delivered the final blow, but the courage to fight for one's dreams.